Welcome everyone here on Facebook. We are live from UN headquarters in New York. I am Helene Dawn Rosengren with the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and I'm excited to be here joined by Dawn Holland. Dawn is the co-author of the World Economic Situation and Prospects that was launched earlier today here in New York. And we're going to talk about some of the main findings of the report, but this is also an opportunity and a chance for all of you who are watching around the world to share your question with Dawn. Do you have any question on trade, global, what the latest forecast means? Please share it under the comments field under this broadcast, and we will share it with Dawn, and she will do her best to respond to you. So thanks, Dawn, for joining us. The latest report says that we in 2017 have the highest growth since 2011. Does this mean now that we have shaken off the financial crisis?
Well, yes, we are delivering a more upbeat message than we've been able to do for most of the last decade, really. So we're forecasting the strongest growth in several years. And this is partly a reflection of the fact that we have shaken off some of the overhanging fragilities from the global financial crisis. For example, the undercapitalized banking systems have been largely resolved. The extreme fiscal austerity measures that had been in place in several countries have now eased. So with these pressures easing, we do see the world moving towards a somewhat more steady and stable growth rate going forward.
Mm. So are we out of the woods yet?
Are we out of the woods yet?
Yeah.
Well, there still, of course, are some risks in the world. We see high levels of debt. There are geopolitical tensions in a number of areas. There's a large number of uncertainties regarding important policies going forward. So there are some risks in the global economy. But what stands out at the moment is not these risks themselves, but rather the fact that we're seeing a synchronized upturn in global growth in a large number of countries amid stable financial markets and a better position to move the economy forward over the next couple of years.
So for people around the globe now, what does this positive news, what does this stronger economy mean?
In broad terms, strong economic growth is something that policymakers aim for, largely so that they can raise the living standards among the population. One of the other important things that I would highlight is that as we're moving out of the sort of crisis mode of policy making, this gives a great opportunity for policy to refocus away from the short term, putting out fires, crisis mode, towards longer term issues, such as creating more environmentally stable growth. Reducing inequalities, promoting investment in key long-term areas like developing resilience to climate change, like supporting productivity growth going forward. These issues can now and must now come to the forefront of the policy making.
Is the strengthened economy evenly spread, or are there some regions that you find are still lagging behind now?
Well, the improvement in the global economy is widespread in that we're seeing 2/3 of the world's economies growing faster this year than they did last year. Is it evenly spread? Well, I would in particular look at GDP in per capita terms. So if you look at which you can interpret as a sort of average income of individuals in an economy, if you look at economic growth in those terms, we see several regions that continue to lag behind the rest of the world. In particular, in parts of Africa and in Latin America, GDP per capita actually declined quite sharply in 2016, which means that rather than improving living standards, we're actually taking a step back and deteriorating standards of living. negligible growth is expected in per capita terms in most of these regions for this year, 2018 and 2019. So that just emphasizes how difficult it is to make progress in goals like eradicating poverty, in goals like creating decent jobs for all, when we're seeing hardly any change in economic activity on a per capita basis.
Were there any findings that surprised you and your team when you worked and prepared this report? Were there any findings that you can...
Well, I'd say probably the most surprising finding was that we had underestimated the growth prospects for this year, and indeed underestimated them for last year as well. And that is sort of noteworthy in itself, because for the last 7, 8 years, our forecasts have repeatedly been found to be overly optimistic, because we just, like most forecasters, had really underestimated the extent of the continued impacts from factors overhanging from the global financial crisis, from the policies that were introduced in order to redress fiscal imbalances following the global financial crisis. These all had much bigger negative impacts on growth than we had expected, so we kept having to revise down and down and down our forecast. And this year, which I think is a great, more positive message, we actually underestimated growth. So it actually is turning out to be better than expected.
Oh, that's great news. Also, looking through a sustainable development lens, what does this strengthened growth mean for the environment and for these 17 sustainable development goals?
So there are close links between economic growth and many of the sustainable development goals. Many of the goals, like eradicating poverty, creating jobs, they require a stronger economic growth. And so on that front, this is a very welcome development. Now, let's look at the environment, on the other hand. Stronger growth brings with it higher levels of production, which brings with it higher levels of energy use and the higher levels of emissions that is related to that. We have seen this year the level of global energy-related emissions rise, and that's for the first time in 3 years. We saw 3 years of stagnant emission levels, and now this year, combined with the stronger economic growth, we are seeing a rise in emissions, and that is of great concern, because we have this target of aiming to reach peak levels of emissions by 2020, which means we really need to see the delinking between economic growth and environmental damage happen now. So we need to accelerate progress towards more sustainable and cleaner energy use in both developed countries and developing countries worldwide.
Thank you. Yes, and the report, for those of you who are watching, we will share on this under this broadcast also a direct link to the report, so you can also find some of the policy, the recommendations that the team is making also in connection with the different forecasts. We have received some questions from the online community, so thank you so much for sharing them in advance. So we have Rommel, who asks about the economy in India and the economic prognosis for India in relation to the global economy. So if you can share some of the prospects for India with Rommel here.
Yes, well, so India did see some slowdown in economic growth as a result of economic policy changes made at the turn of this year. But nonetheless, it remains one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and we're expected to see the slowdown that we saw has a relatively temporary impact. So we're expecting an acceleration in growth in India for 2018 and 2019. We have it supported by strong consumption, stable inflation, and government investment, particularly in infrastructure, as well as ongoing structural reforms in the economies. So one of the areas where India's has some challenges would be in terms of the private sector investment. So the balance sheets of the banking system and of the corporate sector have some challenges there, which is holding back the ability of the private sector to garner the resources that's needed in order to accelerate private sector investment growth. So that's one area that remains a challenge. Also, I would mention the high levels of inequality and of poverty in some parts of the country also remain a significant policy challenge.
We hope that that was informative for you, Rommel, and we hope you're also watching now so you can hear the question, or the answer, rather. We have another one from Martin. He says, you know, the West report is very broad. Which parts did you contribute to most? And are you satisfied with the result?
That's a very, thank you for the question. Yes, it is a broad report, and it actually, there are over 65 different contributors to the report, so it's definitely a collaborative piece which is produced by economists here in UN DESA in collaboration with economists at UNCTAD and in the UN's 5 regional commissions, as well as from experts in some other international organizations. So what was my personal role? Well, I guess I would say my main project was to coordinate the inputs from all of these different 65 contributors around the world and create a sort of coherent and consistent message across the whole report. I'm happy that we have delivered a satisfactory report. I'm happy that we have a slightly more upbeat message that we can deliver, and I hope very much that our policy message, which means refocusing attention on some of these longer-term policy objectives, comes to the forefront in policy making around the world, and I hope that that message gets through.
Actually, we just had another question from Salman. He asks, can the One Belt Road initiative contribute to a boost in the global economy?
Yes, absolutely. So the Belt and Road Initiative is essentially an enormous infrastructure program, which is initiated by China, but involves a very large number of bordering countries, investment in Central Asia, investment in other parts of East Asia, and even going as far into as Africa in some parts. So yes, this is and can provide an important stimulus both in terms of short-term growth and also developing the infrastructure to ease trade and to stimulate growth and productivity in the regions going forward. So yes, indeed.
And Jalil is asking, how is Afghanistan's economy doing, up or down? If you can share, I mean, it's a big report and many regions too.
I can. May I refer to my forecast for the country? Or
yeah, you can.
I would just need to grab my report. So, like I said, there are 65 individual contributors to the report. So. My colleague Yasuhisa Yamamoto, who produces the forecast for Afghanistan, and Sebastian Vergara, they will have would be able to answer this more quickly. But I can give you a quick look at the forecast. So we see a basically steady growth in Afghanistan, estimated growth of 3.2% this year, with some acceleration towards 3.5% to 4% in the next couple of years.
Thank you. And I think Those were the questions that we received. You can also post in the comments field still if you have any questions that you forgot to ask now. But we want to thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Dawn, for sharing your insights and the forecast, what we can expect now from the global economy. We will post a link to the report under this broadcast, and also information or a URL where you can get more updates from the Global Economic Monitoring Unit, because they actually produce monthly briefings on the world economy, so you can actually stay updated every month of the year to know how we're doing. Thank you again for watching. Thank you, Dawn. And also remember to follow us here on Facebook, but also follow UN DESA on Twitter @UN DESA. Again, thanks so much.